Welcome to the Stolen Goodbyes podcast with me, Karen Rice. This is being recorded remotely due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Today I'm joined by Georgina Forsythe from Warwickshire, who lost her father, John Langford, to COVID-19 on May the 7th. He was 63. Welcome, Georgina.
Hello.
Thanks for joining the podcast.
Okay.
I wanted to begin by asking you what your dad was like as a person.
Oh, he was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was very quiet. So he died when I was 36, and even in those 36 years, I still had to say to him when we were having a conversation, "Dad, can you just speak up a bit?" Because he'd almost whisper. So he was very quiet, shy, but he had a very sharp wit. He was really funny. You'd be sat in a room full of people for half an hour sometimes, and then he'd just come out with a one-liner and have us all in stitches. He was a real hard worker. He'd been a fireman for 23 years, and he was his passion. He absolutely loved it, and he worked full time pretty much until the day he died. Mum was battling with him to go part-time, which he did up until he started going part-time about a year before he died, but that was a struggle. Yeah, he just had a fantastic work ethic.
He spent his life saving other people's lives then?
That's it. I wanted to say that to the people in hospital. Please, he saved so many lives. It's his turn now. Yeah.
And what was he like as a father?
Amazing. So we grew up in Cheshire in a village called Tarpley. It was more traditional back then. I've got my own family now, but back I was born in 83. It was very much the man went out to work, or it was in our house. Dad went out to work, and Mum was always at home. She had the odd job as a dinner lady and cook, but worked around the kids. But yeah, he was a fantastic dad. He was the provider, but when he was at home, he was with us, and we went on lovely family holidays and had some amazing times together. We really did.
Any particular memories that stand out for you that you look back on now?
Yeah, the holidays. I think with a lot of families, holidays are happy memories, aren't they? So we went to America. That was our big treat holiday. In 94, so I was 11. We did the West Coast, hired a car, 5 of us. I've got 2 brothers. Did Golden Gate Bridge, did the Grand Canyon with helicopter ride. Got lost a few times because Dad's sense of direction was dismal, which I've inherited. So that and camping holidays in France. He actually broke his foot on one of the holidays in France. In fact, he did get ill quite a lot on the holiday. So yeah, it's quite ironic that his story ended in the way it did. But yeah.
How did he break his foot?
He was playing 5-a-side football with some of the locals, yeah, and fell in a funny way down a rabbit hole. We ended up having a French nurse have to come to our tent every day for the rest of the holiday to give him injections. So that was fun. Yeah. It was never dull with Dad around. Never dull.
That's a great anecdote.
Mm.
And what do you miss about him most now?
Well, I'm one of 3. I've got a brother either side, so I'm the only girl, and I was a proper daddy's girl, and just miss his hugs. Gave me the best hugs, and just a soppy look. He was too soft with me, really, and he'd just say, "Oh, my darling, come in, give me a big hug." That's what I miss.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
So bring me to March this year and the run up to your parents going away.
Okay, so this year was a big year for our family. Mum turned 60 in January, and it was Mum and Dad's Ruby wedding anniversary, end of March, so 40 years married. And they decided to go on a cruise to South America. So it was actually me that dropped them off at Birmingham Airport on the 1st of March. And it's quite hard to remember back to then, but thinking, well, what were we thinking? There was, coronavirus was around, but at that time the FCO were just saying, as long as COVID isn't in the country that you're travelling to, just carry on. So
that
I
was
just
that was government advice.
Government advice, yeah. And we've this has never happened before, so I'd sent them on their merry way. And
where were they going?
South America, on a cruise.
That was the 1st of March.
1st of March, yeah. I just told them to have, a fantastic time. It was a trip of a lifetime. It was a 3.5 week holiday. So yeah, just sent them on their way and said, have a great time, and didn't really hear from them. We had a family WhatsApp group going, and the only time we heard from them in the first 2 weeks was for them to message my brothers to say, can you sort our football out? They did a thing called Super Six, and they said, can you sort our fixtures out for us? And we joked at the time and said, oh, blooming heck, there's a global pandemic going on, not heard from you in 2 weeks, and all you're worried about is your football fixtures. But yeah, and it was fine. Everything was absolutely fine. But as you know, over here, things started to escalate pretty quickly overnight, really. And I think that was about mid-March, maybe a bit later, the 17th. I got an email from Mum off the cruise ship, basically saying the cruise company that they were travelling with was cutting their holiday short. Instead of them travelling back on the 24th of March, they'd got flights back on the 19th from Buenos Aires. So I thought, okay, it's not ideal, but at least we're going to get them home. So they had flights booked back to Heathrow. And Mum was saying, can you come and get us? Because by then, I think we'd gone into lockdown. It's all a bit hazy because so much has happened. So I said, I'll be there. I will be there to get you from Heathrow. Don't worry about it. The 19th of March came, which is when they were meant to be flying. And apparently they got woken up on the cruise ship by Buenos Aires officials, hammering on their door at 3:30 in the morning, taking everyone's temperatures. It was just madness by the sounds of it. Anyway, Mum and Dad had to be in reception for 7:30 that morning, took their cases, and they just waited and waited and waited and waited to be disembarked. They apparently let some Canadians off the ship, some Swiss and some Argentinians, but they wouldn't let the Brits off to get the flights home. And consequently, Mum and Dad missed that flight back to Heathrow and had to stay on the ship.
What reason did they give?
There wasn't. My mum said, is it political? We'll never know. I mean, if they hadn't have let anyone off the ship, I could swallow that pill, because I'd say, well, the world was in panic mode. Of course they wouldn't let them off. Although at that time there were no COVID cases on board, I would have understood that. But the fact they let some nationalities off and not others, it's unacceptable to me, really.
So was there much communication with your mum or dad when they were on the ship?
Yeah, so from then there was daily communication. My mum's got up and running now, but at that time they were both technophobes. They had a phone with them, but it wouldn't work, so I couldn't FaceTime them. My brothers couldn't FaceTime them, but they could email us. So we had daily emails from them. The plan from then was...
How were they both feeling? Sorry, how were they both feeling at that time?
It's okay. Very, very anxious to get home.
But were they well in themselves?
Well, my dad had rheumatoid arthritis, so he was on steroids, and as a result his immune system was low. So he was the concern, really. They both have overactive thyroids, but really it was the rheumatoid arthritis. So yeah, just anxious to get home, and it's just very, very worrying time. I remember reading the email off Mum. I was downstairs in the kitchen at home saying, look, can't beat around the bush, gee, we've not been able to get home. And I just broke down. I just, when you just have a gut feeling something's going to go horribly wrong, and I just couldn't stop. I just broke down. I just was beside myself, really. My husband had to come and calm me down. But the plan from there was, by the cruise company, to just try and get them onto dry land so they could be repatriated. So they then spent nearly 2 weeks at sea. They tried getting off at Montevideo, Rio. Nowhere in South America would let them off. They then ended up at Fort Lauderdale in Florida 2 weeks later, but the Coast Guard wouldn't let them off there because 2 other cruise ships had got in before them. So how
were they then at that point?
I mean, so in that 2 weeks, Mum and Dad were meant to be home on the 24th of March, and their anniversary was the 29th of March, and they were actually on the cruise ship then. And they ended up having a party with some of their friends. So they apparently they had a whale of a time. They were in a little bubble. There were no COVID cases on board, as far as they knew. And they were hearing stories back at home of us fighting over toilet roll, and I was starting homeschooling my 2 kids, so they were feeling sorry for us, really. They were in a bubble, and
at least that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as I said, daily communication from Mum, just saying we're trying to keep going, and the cruise company were being brilliant and keeping the entertainment going. But she was like, you could see it painted on all the staff's faces. They were exhausted, and everyone just wanted to get home. Anyway, we got to beginning of April. They finally docked in Miami. And after weeks at sea, we were just so happy. But I remember somehow Mum called. I think she managed to call me from a cabin, and she said Dad's not feeling well. And at that point, I said to her, you can't write this. We've been fighting for you to get repatriation flights, and there were 2 BA flights waiting on the runway at Miami, and Dad had a fever. And I said, has he got a cough? Well, she said he always had a cough. He was an ex-smoker. He'd not smoked for years, but she said he has got a cough, but it's just his normal cough. Anyway, he was being sick, which is a symptom. It's come out. And he got moved to another cabin. Mum and Dad got separated on the ship. At this point, everyone on board had been isolated in their rooms because COVID had actually got onto the cruise ship. And the repatriation flights with the other 400 Brits went back to Heathrow, and Mum was left on her own on the cruise ship, and Dad got admitted to a hospital in Miami, and Mum was unable to go with him because of the pandemic.
How awful.
It's just horrific.
Did you speak to her at that point? That must have been a low point.
Oh, I'll never forget it. It's just, I remember saying to her, this is inhumane. Like, how is this able to happen? And she told me when she got home, when she got back to the UK, she actually ended up, she was in a cabin and she fell into the wardrobe. She must have just lost her footing, and she just fell into the wardrobe, and she was just sobbing. She was just distraught. We couldn't really get in touch with Dad. Actually, at that point, we didn't even know where he was. We didn't know what. Nobody called my mum to say, oh, by the way, Linda, your husband's been admitted to such and such a hospital. Don't worry, he's okay. We'll make sure someone from the consulate in Miami will look after him. He's been assigned to this person. We had to chase. We were always having to chase, and find out where he was.
Who made the decision to move him and to bring him to hospital?
Well, there were two places Dad could go off the cruise ship. Either he was going home on that repatriation flight, but he wasn't allowed because he was symptomatic. He couldn't stay on the cruise ship. They didn't have the medical care there. So the only place he was going was hospital. So it was the medical staff on board the cruise ship checked him over, said he had COVID symptoms, so he had to go to hospital to be tested.
Okay. And what happened then with regard to your mum?
So Mum then spent 5 days isolated in that cabin on the cruise ship because she'd been in contact with Dad, who'd had symptoms. They wouldn't let her fly home at that point, so she spent 5 days on her own in that cabin, not knowing where my dad was. She didn't have a mobile phone on her, so she could ring. She had a phone in her room. She could ring out to me, but I didn't know the number and nobody would give me the telephone number, so I couldn't call her.
Oh my word.
So she was just distraught, distressed. She was out of her mind. Yeah, so I was playing. At this point, I'm self-employed. I'd lost both my clients because I work in hospitality sales. They'd said sorry, got to put things on hold. I'd started homeschooling my two kids, and this was going on. And I don't know how I did it, to be honest, but yeah, tracked Dad down in the hospital. And he had a phone in his room, but it broke. The phone blooming broke. So we couldn't contact Dad very well. But I did manage to speak to him. He had his test for COVID. He was waiting on results.
How was he in himself at that point?
He sounded, the day after he got admitted, he sounded breathless to me. And I said, Dad, are you all right? Do you need some oxygen? And he was like, I just feel really sick. He just felt really nauseous. And then I spoke to him a couple of days after, and he sounded 10 times worse. And the words he said to me was, I'm buggered, G. And I thought, you sounded, Dad. I didn't say it to him. I just said, come on, it doesn't matter how long it takes, Dad. You need to get better. We need you. I think at this point he knew Mum was going to be flying home, and he'd said to her, get off that blooming ship, just get off the ship. He just wanted a home, he wanted a safe. That was the kind of person he was.
Oh, that's so touching. Looking after her.
He always looked after her. He was more worried about Mum and the phone bill. When I called him, he emailed me because he had his Kindle with him in his room, and he emailed me saying, thank you so much for letting me know Mum's okay. Please don't call again. It'll cost you a fortune. I was thinking, oh my God, only you would be worrying about that.
Did you have any conversations with the medics in America?
It was as time went on, yes. But at that stage, it was very limited. We were just in panic mode. We just wanted to know he was being looked after, that he was okay. At that point, and looking back, I feel so guilty. I was more worried about my mum, because my mum they were both in dire situations, but Mum was on her own in a cabin, and we didn't know what was going to happen. So I was more worried about her. At least I knew Dad was in a hospital and he had people around him. So yeah, it was just a really, really intense, crazy, worrying, fraught, ridiculously stressful situation.
And so your mother was in the cabin.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Well, she was, as I say, she was there for 5 days. About day 3 or 4, she got a call from the consulate over there saying, would you consider flying back to the UK? To which her answer was absolutely no. You can swivel. Not leaving my husband with potential COVID in a foreign country. But it then got to the stage where they said to her, look, Linda, you can't stay on the cruise ship. We're disembarking everyone. She was one of the last to leave that ship. You're not allowed to stay in a hotel. the American authorities wouldn't let her. And honestly, me and my brother said we wouldn't have wanted her to do that because she was at risk of catching the virus. She just wasn't safe out there, and she wasn't allowed to go and see Dad in hospital. So they said, you've got to fly back to the UK. And I just do not know how she did that. I don't know how she had the strength to fly home. And when she flew home, she then had to go into 2 weeks isolation because she'd been on an infected cruise ship. So she had to spend 2 weeks alone at home, making daily calls to the hospital, to Dad. It's just horrific. How we just looking back, it was just like layer upon layer of cruelty. It just kept coming.
She must have struggled with leaving him behind.
Oh, she didn't have a choice. Hands were tied, but yeah, she just. Your husband of 40 years is ill in hospital. She couldn't go to him. But she called me. I'd called my brothers, and she called me and she said, what should I do, G? I said, look, Mum, you haven't got a choice, and we want you home. At that time, it was, come on, it's America, it's private medical healthcare. Surely they'll be taking good care of him. We'll get Dad right, but in the meantime, you can't stay out there and be at risk of catching the virus as well. Let's just get you home, and then we can all focus on Dad together. We said, you'll have the internet at home, you've got your phone, we'll tackle Dad as a family.
So what happened then?
No, just hell. Daily phone calls to the hospital. I think it was trying to piece everything together because we're limited with our information that we have on Dad's hospital journey. But I think the night Mum flew back to the UK, Dad was then admitted to intensive care. His state just, he had to go on oxygen and he was admitted to ICU. So then it was, look, the good thing about him going to ICU, the communication improved. We had daily calls with the doctors who were, when we got to speak to them, they were incredible. But yeah, I think it was 6 days then in ICU. They had him in the prone position on his side, trying to really get his oxygenation levels up. He was on an oxygen mask. And then we had the horrible call to say he's been intubated. We've had to put him on a ventilator. And then it was 3 weeks. He fought for 3 weeks. They gave him a thing called plasma, which I've never heard of. But apparently over here we were slower to get it. But that's one thing I am sure of over there. He did get such good medical treatment. He had a plasma transfusion. They really did everything they could, but he just had enough. He was done.
How awful. And that he be so far away from home and his loved ones.
No, I just can't begin to describe the pain that I felt when I got the call from Mum to say, Dad's died. It physically hit me in the chest, and just dying. When someone goes to hospital, you're there, aren't you? And you just assume that's your right, it's their right as a human, that you're going to be there. And for him to have died alone, I've accepted he's gone. It's nearly 5.5 months on. I've accepted he's gone, but I will never accept the circumstances around my dad's death, ever, because he was such a good man. He worked his arse off all his life. He was an amazing husband, dad, granddad to my 2 kids, and he did not deserve to die alone in America, thousands of miles from his family. It's just unbelievable.
Do you feel that if he had both your parents had been allowed onto the flight from Buenos Aires to London, that there would have been a different outcome.
Yeah, he'd be here. He'd absolutely be here. And I don't want to feel angry because, you know, anger can eat you up. And Dad wouldn't want me to feel angry. And I've thought, yes, I could get angry at Boris for not shutting down earlier. I could get angry at the officials at Buenos Aires, but it's not going to bring my dad back. It's really not. But yeah, if they'd have been allowed to get off at that point, I don't even think the virus was on the ship at that point. In fact, they could have brought it on. I don't know. I don't know how it got on the ship. But yeah, he'd still be here.
So were you able to bring your dad home? What
Eventually.
after he passed?
3 weeks it took for us to get him home, and there were conversations, you know, because of COVID, that we may have had to have got him cremated out in America, which to me, oh my God, I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it. But the insurance company were amazing. And yeah, we managed to get him flown home, but it took 3 agonising weeks to get him flown home. And even when he did fly home, it was the most long-winded route ever. It was Miami to Dallas Fort Worth, so inland, and then Dallas to Heathrow. And then he was driven from Heathrow up to where we live in the Midlands. So yeah, he had quite a journey.
But he got home.
He got home, thank God. So I'm not thankful of many things, obviously, but that is one thing I am. And us as a family are so thankful we were able to get him home and have some kind of service for him.
How was the funeral?
Do you know what? I have to say, there were 7 of us, but it was beautiful. The crematorium where he was, I've been to cremation services before with grandparents where it's been a room with no natural lighting, the coffin goes behind a curtain, and that's what I had in my head for Dad's. But no, this crematorium had floor to ceiling, massive window overlooking these fields, loads of natural light, and it was just beautiful. And our local vicar, who's also called John and same age as Dad, he took the service and he did such an amazing job. He managed to find, and I know him quite well because our kids go to Sunday school. But this reading he found from the Bible, he managed to find a reading where loved ones are parted by an ocean and how painful it is. And it was just and the songs we chose were really personal to us as a family, and it was beautiful. Obviously, we would have liked a proper funeral for him, but we made the best out of a horrific situation. And also our family at that point, me, my husband, my 2 brothers, their partners, and my mum, we had drawn in so close and so tight. I don't think we'd have let anyone else in anyway. We'd just battened down the hatches, just went into survival mode. We were close before this happened. Now, nothing, I don't think anything could break us.
How is your mum now?
Do you know what? That woman is just incredible. She always says, no, 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 she won't have it. But she's just so incredible how she's dealt with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, she has had the lowest of low points, but she's gone back to work. She's got a job at a local sandwich shop. Only very recently, in the past few weeks, she's gone back there 1 day a week, which was so brave of her. She's been volunteering at a local alpaca farm, picking up alpaca poo 1 day a week. But she loves it. She's started knitting with alpaca wool. She loves knitting and craft stuff. She's been helping me with the kids. my husband has been working from her house because she's got 3 bedrooms and he's having to work from home. So she's got a little office worker, she says, and makes my husband a sandwich every day and is looking after him. So she's just trying to keep as busy as you can. I mean, grieving for a loved one when it was strict lockdown where you can't even hug your loved ones, it was unbearable, and she couldn't keep busy. There were no clubs, no nothing for her to go to. So, but yeah, she's doing amazing. She really is.
What was your last conversation with your dad?
Oh God, this is so weird. So it was at Birmingham Airport when I dropped them off, and he said, I said, "See you, Dad. Have a great time." Gave him a hug, and then he went, "See you, love." He went, "Just so you know, my will is on the top drawer of the cabinet, filing cabinet in our bedroom." And me and Mum were like, "Dad, don't say that." But that was it. They were literally that was the last conversation I had with him, face to face. Did he know? I don't know. Just I still find it weird that's what he said.
Is there anything that keeps you awake at night?
I think actually, I don't know if this sounds terrible, but he's the first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning. And when he first passed away, I was waking up all, 3:30, 4 in the morning, I'd wake up and he'd just be on my mind.
If you could go back and change anything, what would it be?
Just to say to them, don't get on that bloody ship. Don't go. Just don't go. I do beat myself up. I think it's because I dropped them off at the airport, and I was saying, well, we all were. We were keeping an eye on the COVID cases, but there was nothing in South America. So, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? The government advice was it was safe. So, but yeah, that's what I'd change. Just tell them not to go. But they wouldn't have listened. They'd have gone anyway.
What emotions are you left feeling now?
Anger. Anger is a feeling I do not want to feel, but I am. But I am having counselling with everything that's gone on, and I'm aware anger is part of grief. Don't feel angry at anyone in particular. I just really miss my dad. I just miss him. And I think, would I feel better if the circumstances around his death would be better? And I've come to the conclusion, no, I wouldn't, because I still wouldn't have my dad. I just miss him. And I feel robbed. 63. Feel robbed of at least a decade, at least, if not 2.
What's the one thing you wish people understood about what you've been through?
COVID related or
yes.
Just it's a tricky one, that, because I just wish and I have to say here, my friends and family have been my rock. They've been incredible, but people I see on Facebook, and I just wish they understood the pain I feel when I read stuff around the lines of, oh, it's a hoax, it's just the flu, we just need to carry on as normal. And I just think, have a little bit of consideration for the family members of the 40,000 plus people in the UK that have lost their life. Horrid virus. And understand, if we hadn't gone into lockdown, we don't know the full figures, but it's something like 500,000 people would have died had we not gone into lockdown, not 40,000. So yes, I hate this pandemic. I want it to go away. Every single day coronavirus is on the news. That's a daily reminder for me and my family as to why we've lost Dad. So I more than anyone want this to just go away, but we've just got to ride through it and get through it as best we can. I think people need to think a bit more. Going back to normal, you can't. Okay, we go back to normal. How many lives are going to be lost through doing that? I just don't think people are rationally thinking that bit through.
How do you feel about the fact she couldn't say goodbye?
Oh, I just went goosebumpy then. I understand the reasons why I couldn't say goodbye. Just why me? Why us? It's just so cruel. Cruel is the word. It's just all been so cruel. Unbelievably.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Georgina? Anything you'd like the world to know or to...
I think that's it. I don't want to preach to anyone. Just imagine if you had lost your nearest and dearest to this. Just really sit and think about it, and then take action accordingly. That's all I'd say.
Okay, thank you very much, Georgina.
Thank you.